Good day, good evening, and good morning. Hello, everyone. I am Brian Anthony Garcia, and I'm with Michael Pena, and this is the Cloudy Days. Yeah, Michael, how are you?
Hello. I'm good, thanks. It's a very timely time to record, Brian, because it's literally cloudy outside.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's been hot this past few days, clear skies. Now
yeah.
it's cloudy.
Yeah. You can't really tell sometimes if it's gonna be hot or cold. It was really hot yesterday. I was outside too, but now I'm. Yeah, it's pretty. It feels pretty good today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So what are we gonna talk about today, Brian?
Well, I was thinking we talk about something about databases. There's been new stuff announced with the database, but especially with the Azure space, and at the same time, I feel like there is something new with like databases as a whole. Like, you heard of vector databases?
Yes. Again, vector is something I'm very familiar with. It's
Mm-hmm.
been in my headspace for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's probably the easiest way to explain it is that we're entering that new iteration of data storage, right? And because we're
Yeah.
in that AI era, like now we have this new data type called vectors, embeddings, and so on.
Yeah. Well, I've heard a lot about it, and you've been raving about it for a long time too. And I'm pretty sure you've done your fair share of like speaking engagements talking about vectors, and so I think there's a reason behind that. And I think everyone in the space knows that, and that's why there's now a lot of options for
So many options, yeah.
yeah, so many options for the vector databases. Um, and sometimes it makes things difficult to really choose which one to use. And especially right now, there's still kind of like it's a bit of I'd say it's still in the beginning. It's kind of like it's still it's a
Early
lot of people
days, yeah.
haven't really heard of it, but now there's really a lot of options, and we're not really sure which one to use.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd say let's filter it down a bit to kind of like make it easier for us who are in the Microsoft space, who wants to work in the Azure stack, and
Yeah.
let's maybe have a look at some stuff that are only within Azure. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
it's not like the 80s or 90s anymore where you just have to choose between Microsoft, Oracle, and IBM. Right now,
Uh-huh.
things are so different now. There's so many options out there. Some are very specialized. Some are like general purpose, and yeah. But in the Azure space, these are I would say some of those hero services, right? That we can talk about.
Mm. Yeah. I'll be honest, I haven't really used vectors, or I haven't used it in any projects yet. So, can you explain to me more what vectors are?
Okay, all right. So think of it like vectors is just a new form factor or a new format in storing data. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
just think of it like this. Back in the days, we are just supporting tables, which is like columnar and rows, right? And then
Right. Yeah.
when NoSQL came in, then we became like unstructured or semi-structured in particular,
Mm.
right? So that's why it's more around like document based, like JSON format, right? Now in this third iteration, the that JSON format is not AI native, and we
Mm.
want to support a data type that's native to AI, right? So in
I see.
particular, because of again ChatGPT, LLMs, it skyrocketed a lot of use case. Now, the way that data is being used for either training or for retrieval or relevance, meaning
Mm.
if someone's like if you're talking to the LLM and for you to query data based off your information, right? Then you need a special type format for
I
that
see.
one, and that's through this thing called vectors, right?
Vector. Okay.
So vectors is basically like a multi-dimensional array. Like, think of it like 3D is like three-dimensional, right? But
I see.
vectors is like multi-dimensional, like thousand
Mm.
dimensional interpretation of data, right?
Yeah.
And with that, you would know it's hard to visualize it in naked eye, but you can create some relevance between certain words, certain topics, right? Certain voices, certain this, like and that's what vectors are. Like it's solving a problem of relevance, right? Instead of just a plain keyword search of like if I'm searching for capital, the
Mm-hmm.
word capital, right? Like I'll
Yeah.
traverse through my database or through my search engine, and then any word that says capital, you'll retrieve that, right?
Okay.
But with vectors, you can also add some flavors around it in terms of context, right? Like, are
Mm.
you talking about capital city or capital crime or
I see.
capital song by Taylor Swift, right? So it could mean
Oh.
different things, right? But through vectors, you can create that form of embeddings, like
Mm.
a thought process, the prompt, the chat, or anything can be converted to an embedding. And through vectors, they live in that vector space, and you can see the distance between them, how relevant they are.
I see.
Right.
Okay, so in summary or in simpler words, so vector embeddings, or just making these text, even images. I'm assuming
Even images, yeah.
like documents, and you can convert them or make them, convert them into like set of numbers, and these set of numbers, because I don't really want to think about like, oh, what's this multi-dimensional array, but in reality they are just being converted into something that's readable by like a computer, right? It's like a
Yeah.
rather like a much more understandable way of doing search, and so you can use that to kind of like figure out the similarity between like based on your search term and the vectors, right? So it's
Yeah.
really just that. So it's a set of numbers that you use to do search.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. But then there's also this one called RAG. It's a retrieval augmented generation. So, how does it relate to vectors?
Okay. All right. So by the way, rag, I really I kind of like hate love the name because like rag is
Me
like, yeah,
too.
it's like
Um,
rag
uh,
the riches story, you know.
I'll be honest. I've been working on a lot of, I say, dashboards with my other clients. That RAG to me means red, amber, green.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
That's what I thought. What are they talking about? Like what's
Yeah.
RAG? Oh, it's a
Uh,
retrieval augmented
all right.
generation. So yeah.
Okay. So what is rag doing that
Mm-hmm.
traditionally we can't do? So again, in machine learning, in particular in data science, if you're creating a model, your
Uh-huh.
own machine learning model, right? So you're going to build it on top of your data, right? You're kind
Right.
of like, hey, here's my data from my database in Parquet, CSV, or anything format, right?
Uh-huh.
Like now train your model based on that data, right? But now we have LLMs, large language models, which is like
Right.
big, right? Now, uh, you can't just put in your data in there and saying, hey, I want to retrain the LLM with my own data,
Yeah.
right? Because that means you need to have the hardware that
Mm-hmm.
OpenAI and Google, Meta, and everyone, right? Like in order to train or retrain the
Yeah.
model based on your data, right?
Could be
So that's
could be
why
very expensive too.
it's very expensive, right? So that's why you can't do that, right? But now the LLM alone is not enough, right? Like it's not talking about your data, like, and maybe you don't even want to feed your data to OpenAI or those LLMs, right?
Uh-huh.
Now RAG is kind of like an enterprise approach of like, hey, I still want to use the LLM, but I want to base it off my own data, right?
Oh,
Like
I
my
see.
own
Okay.
data, right? Like, so now RAG is like that bridge, right? Think of it
Mm-hmm.
like the server or the waiter in the restaurant who's gonna say, "Hey, you're the LLM. Hey, you're the you're that database, and I'm here to facilitate all
I
this
see.
for you." All right, so that when someone is asking for something, let's say insurance policies and stuff like that, you're not
Mm.
gonna base it off from from the data where OpenAI was trained for, right? Because
Yeah,
it doesn't have that insurance policy of your
it,
company,
it might not have it.
right?
Yeah, not the
Yeah,
latest data at least.
yeah. So basically, that's it, Brian. Like RAG is meant to solve that, right? That
Yeah,
specific problem statement of I wanna chat on my own data.
I see. Is it something that, let's say, for example, ChatGPT do as well, or?
Yeah, to an extent, right? Again, there are different approach on this as well, right? Whether you want to do it like from an LLM point of view, connect to the data, or do you want to be like from an application point of view, connect
Mm-hmm.
to the LLM and your data, which is
I
that's
see.
RAG. And then there's also a different approach wherein like through graphs, right?
I see.
So there's also graph approach wherein like you're trying to collect all of these different data sources and put it into a graph, and then you're just
Mm-hmm.
talking to that graph regardless if it's an LLM or um, a database. And there are also other approach like few shots learning, but it's not scalable. Few shot is basically saying, hey, you're telling the LLM, here are the 10 most asked questions in my
Mm-hmm.
system, and try to answer like this, right? So
Yeah.
it's good for those scenarios, but for data from like especially transactional or even analytical data,
Mm-hmm.
you want to base that off from a database.
Yeah. Yeah. All right then. Okay, that makes sense. So, um, I guess let's probably just talk about like how our database like deals with this. Like, how does the database fit in this whole thing? Like, so, um, so this is how it works apparently. So there's like a data source that you can you can extract the data from, and then AI search can use the data to well, it's actually a bit of it's missing something, I believe. But with this, you can now kind of like generate embeddings from the data, right? And then the AI search will now, along with the OpenAI, will allow us to do like these vector search with these vector embeddings as well. So ideally, what's going to happen is that you have an app. Um, there, you can type in something, let's say a prompt, and then OpenAI service will generate or convert it into a vector embedding, and then the AI search will help you like do the search of see the similarities from your data. That is also, of
It,
course,
yeah,
has
exactly.
the embedding. Yeah.
Just I just want to point out that in particular under that Azure OpenAI service, there
Mm-hmm.
are different models, right? So it's not all GPTs, right? So there's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
the
yeah.
embedding model, which is the ADA zero
Ada.
zero two, which is
Yeah.
very popular embedding model, right? So that means
Uh-huh.
that your prompt get and you talk to ADA, and then ADA generates that embedding for you, and then use that embedding in AI search, and then AI search traverses through the vector database and say, hey, how is the user's embedding related to
Mm-hmm.
the embedding stored in my vector
Yeah.
database, right?
Yeah, and the purpose of index here is mainly to make, because I'm assuming the vector embeddings. If you do search to it like like the traditional way, or just doing like like going through each of it, it will take a lot of time. It will be very slow, right? And the purpose of this index is just, well, same purpose as the database indexing, like to make search a lot quicker, to kind of like do the lookup a lot quicker. And I
Yeah,
think
exactly. Yeah.
it is much more significant for the this specific one, or for the vector embeddings, because these vector embeddings are huge, right? There's like it's a huge set of
Yeah, you're basically compressing, let's say, a whole paragraph of text into,
mm-hmm.
into an embedding, right? And
Yeah.
then, yeah, indexing kind of like allows you to not just store the actual embedding itself, which AI search can do, but through indexing, you can also rank them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're not just solely dependent on the vector result. You can also rank them like a mix of vector plus keyword search and like
Oh yeah, I was gonna
like
ask.
yeah.
So
So
that's
that's
the
what
hybrid search, isn't
hybrid
it?
search. Yes, yes,
Yeah. Can you also do like fuzzy search along
yes.
with this? I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and that's one of the value propositions of AI search. So
Mm-hmm.
going through this approach, we're in like in scenarios wherein you're searching for relevant information, AI
Mm-hmm.
search does support those different ways of searching, right? So it's
I
not
see.
just purely vectors, not just keyword. There's fuzzy search. Then there's also semantic search, which again another layer on top of vector. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, so that's one of the key proposition of AI search about trying to collect different information and different data sources as well, and like allowing you to find the relevant information for that user. And
I
you
see.
can also point them to citations, right? Like this came from the Azure database, or this came
I
from
see.
that PDF
Uh-huh.
from that blob storage, and so on.
Like the reference link.
Yeah.
Or yeah. All right then. So yeah, so there's actually a couple of several options for us to, you know, to like have this feature available for us, and one of them is using an Azure SQL database. How does that work? I mean,
All
what
right.
does Azure SQL database offer for us to, you know, integrate AI or to use these vectors into our application?
All right. So I think there are two things that we probably have to tell the listeners first here, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
one is that there is no Azure vector database.
Yeah.
Like there's no like native vector database that says like, hey, in Azure this is the only vector database, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously self-hosting is an option. You have specialized vector database, heaps of them: Quadrant, Milviews, Pinecone, and so on, right? So there is
Yeah.
no Azure vector database. That's what I'm saying,
Do,
right?
do you think that there's going to be an option in the future though? Or
No, no.
I see.
This is my second point, which is the second point is, but then there are already different databases, hero databases in Azure
Uh-huh.
that can act as a vector database,
Yeah.
right? So we've talked about earlier about AI search. So I think AI search is acting as a vector database wherein like all
Yeah.
those indexes can store those embeddings through a form of like a vector database, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although it's
Yeah.
not really a vector database, it's still a search service.
Yeah.
But kind of like one core feature of that is that it can store those
It can
embeddings,
store. Yeah.
right?
Because I was
Now,
wondering, it doesn't really have like a database in the background, like or rather, it's not linked to any database. Like you don't create like a
no,
database behind it. You know,
no.
it's
It,
it's just
it's baked in. That's why
mm,
you're storing the actual embedding in the search engine, right?
yeah.
So in a form of index. So that's why that's one cost consideration as well in
Mm-hmm.
AI search. Wherein if you're using AI search for your storing your vectors, then that means that your index is also going to become bigger, right?
Yeah.
So now, my second point, it in Azure depends on the gravity you're on. Meaning, if you're
Mm-hmm.
coming from a search perspective, then AI search has a vector database. But if you're coming from a point of view of, hey, we already have this database, why can't we just use this database to support vectors, right, and
Yeah.
embeddings?
Yeah.
And there you go. Now we have that through Azure SQL as well, right?
Yeah.
So we're in like if you're coming from a, hey, we already have the data in Azure SQL,
Yeah.
and we don't want to expand our TCO, meaning total cost of ownership,
Uh-huh.
right? Why not just add this new capability, right? That's why, like in the second point here, it even supports native JSON
Right. Yeah.
capabilities, right? So meaning even Azure SQL supports NoSQL because
Oh
of this
yeah,
approach, right?
yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
that's why if you, for those who are kind of like familiar with Azure SQL and like loves Azure SQL and maybe using different libraries like Entity Framework, Dapper, and stuff like that, this
Mm.
becomes like a natural extension for for vectors for
Yeah.
these capabilities, right? Yeah, so I think that's really the rationale around that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask, why not just add this new column for a vector embedding? Does that not work? Like, but yeah, I think you already explained that. Um, yeah. So apart from that, there's also like scenarios that we can have a look at on the Azure SQL database um, for the AI and RAG. So.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely right. Again, what Microsoft or what Azure is basically telling is that just pick and choose, right? Depends on your
Uh,
scenarios because in some scenarios maybe you don't need an AI search, right?
yeah.
But you still want to use vectors, right? And then you might be looking at SLMs like small language models like Phi Phi but Phi by Microsoft as well, right? So you might be looking at scenarios where like it's very specific. Like think of it like a microservice approach, wherein like, hey, we're just using this particular service for this particular AI use case,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you don't need the whole AI search,
Yeah.
big orchestration, chunking, and all those stuff, right? But then you need a database, you need a place to store those vectors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you want to use a model as well. So that's why it's just again more options, right? There's no one
Yeah.
right approach for this. Like it's just more like depending on the use case. And I think it's even gonna be cheaper this way. Like if you have your Azure SQL, which where your data is living already, and then you have an SLM, and then you have your orchestrator there, like LangChain, semantic kernel, Hugging
Mm-hmm.
Face, and so on, right?
Yeah.
That just opens up different options for you, so you don't always have to go through AI search and Azure SQL combo all the time.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, though this is not really directly related to the Azure SQL database, there is going to be this additional support in the SQL Server 2025, which I hope in the future will also be available for for us in Azure. So there's kind of like a big support now with the vector store in indexing, which is much more efficient, even with the hybrid AI vector and vector searching. So it is, you can easily just use
Exactly,
T-SQL.
because yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. You can use T-SQL, and at the same time, there's no on-prem version of Azure AI Search, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like if I'm in an on-prem scenario, but I wanna do RAG, I wanna do AI LLM
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? What options do I have, right? Well, I don't.
Yeah.
I still want. I have SQL Server deployed in my fleet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to install a dedicated workload just for vectors? So again,
Mm-hmm.
that's why the natural cloud gravity or that technology gravity is just expanding, right?
Yeah. And again, it's like you pick and choose basically. Like you don't really, you have to think about like really what solution will fit you best. Like maybe it's AI search, or stick with the Azure SQL database. Yeah, there are trade offs, but you have to think about really what's the best option for you. But of course, there's still other options. Next one's the Azure Cosmos DB. So, what do you think about this one, Michael?
All right. So this is very interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
by the way, for Azure Cosmos DB, for those who don't know, there are many APIs within Cosmos DB, right? So it's The hero API in Cosmos DB is called NoSQL, which is what we're sharing here, right? But there's also MongoDB, there's Gremlin, there's Cassandra, and so on, right?
Mhm.
So for this one, we're talking about NoSQL, right? So um, the good thing, or like one of the really good use cases of vector search in Cosmos DB for NoSQL is concept of like think of it like a fast way access, or like almost real time, near real time access for vectors, right?
Uh-huh.
Compared to AI search, wherein like it's a post process thing, wherein like, hey, here's a document, process that document, chunk it, convert it to embeddings, put it in AI search, index it, right? But for
Yeah.
Cosmos DB, the use case is a bit different, wherein this is like, hey, we're using this particular data and we're inserting it, updating it as we go along. Think of it like
Uh-huh.
like Redis or like RAM, right? Like
Yeah.
that. That's kind of like that use case. So where will this be very useful for? Like talking about agents. So 2025 is year of the agents. So everyone's
Yeah.
going to create their own agents. And how do agents talk to each other? They talk using embeddings. They use vectors, right?
Yeah.
So how are they going to talk to each other? What persistence layer are they going to use? And that's where Cosmos DB can come in with this disk and capabilities, right? Like
Yeah.
different, agents talking to each other with a shared persistence layer
Uh-huh.
through Cosmos DB, right?
Makes sense. So also, yeah, the disk kind is something that I think I don't know. It's been something that's been used by even the SQL Server, the one that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Is there like other options for indexing,
Uh,
or is
yeah. So by the way, disk and is a cost saving approach
mm,
on this one because compared to, let's say, again, AI search and indexing, right? Like
yeah,
you need a very hot indexing layer for you to
yeah,
retrieve data, right? That's why it's fast. Otherwise,
mm,
it's gonna be slow. But with disk and you can perform those search and relevance indexing even though it's sitting on disk, not in memory,
not in memory, yeah,
right? Yeah, so AI search is memory based workload, right? But then with Cosmos DB, with disk and, it can perform those capabilities of search even though
File.
it's in disk, right?
Wouldn't that
Yeah.
affect any like performance?
No, so that's the beauty of it, right? Like you're actually storing it on this that's particular for this particular it's flat quantized flat
Yeah,
that's specially purpose for this indexing use case.
I see.
So it's fairly new, right?
It's
As
pretty
well.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, there are also like scenarios that you might think about with the generative AI. And you might think, what would you do? Like, what is this specific thing do? Like, the semantic caching, the chat history, the RAG, and the vector databases. So there's how do I say this? There's like options, like, or rather, Azure Cosmos DB allows you to do all these things. And what do you think about this one, Michael?
Yes. So the first one, the semantic caching is, think of it like for those information where, let's say, you want to serve the same information to 10,000 users, but you don't want to consume 10 million tokens as part of that.
Yeah.
That means that if they're searching for the same information, why not just cache that information to them, right? And that's through semantic caching, right? So like think of it like a cache layer, but for LLMs, right? That's why if
Yeah.
Bryan is searching for bicycle and I'm searching for bicycle, like even though our chat prompt is a bit different, but the intent is the same, we're retrieving the same information. Yeah. So that's a cost saving capability, especially for static contents. Chat
Yeah.
history, yeah, that's even OpenAI, the ChatGPT app itself is using Azure Cosmos DB for chat history. So they're
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest consumer of Azure Cosmos DB in this use case. Then RAG, again, this is like a
Yeah,
personalized
it's.
LLM, cheaper
Mm-hmm.
than fine tuning. It's faster iteration on your data. And lastly, is this is much more around the one I mentioned earlier about agents and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. I think if it's more around like an operational um, capability, think of it like you're actively trying. Let's say you're booking a flight, but the flight price changes every minute or so.
Yeah.
Then this could be an approach as well. Versus with an AI search indexing approach post process, you'd have to wait for the churn to finish,
Mm-hmm.
right, to get
And
the up to date
yeah.
information.
And most of these are not really just specific to Azure Cosmos DB, right? It's kind of like some things that you can do really
Yeah.
with the generative AI, with the Azure database options. So yeah. And then now we are jumping into Azure database for Postgres, and yeah. What do you think about it? I haven't actually used the PG vector yet. Are you familiar with this one?
Yeah. Yes. Very very familiar with this one. All right. So Postgres is one of the most loved open source technology out there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So you have Linux, you have Elastic, you have Postgres, you have a lot of this really loved, right? I'm saying loved by most people I've met. Yeah, like they like it. Like they never say bad things about about these technologies. So yeah, Postgres. Obviously, there is a managed service of that, managed platform of that in
Mm-hmm.
Azure called
Yeah.
Azure Database for Postgres. Particularly, there are two deployment models. You have the Flex Server model, which automatically scales up and down, or you have the Cosmos DB model, which uses the Citus extension as well. So you can have Postgres, but in a globally distributed scenario, right?
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in both of those use cases, Postgres comes with an extension called PG Vector. Right.
Uh-huh.
So the vector capabilities and host storing embeddings in Postgres is not natively supported as of the
Mm.
latest version of Postgres, but there is an extension called PG
Extension.
Vector
PG
that
vector.
allows you to store that the embeddings in your
Mm-hmm.
instance of Postgres. Um, yeah, and turning that on is a bit easy. If you're using the Plex server, you just have to go to Azure Portal in the extensions. You can search for Vector and then just have to turn that on. Or you can also invoke a SQL command to turn
Mm.
on that extension. Yeah.
That's what I'm gonna ask you. Like, is there if you're gonna compare like what the options at the moment, like with the vectors, of course, it still makes sense if or I mean, first question probably would be like if you need to do NoSQL or a relational one. Um, do you like think of between PostgreSQL or Azure SQL database when you're dealing with something like this?
All right. So the one of the beauty of Postgres is in terms of adoption, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, people working on AWS, GCP, or wherever, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
they might be using Postgres already, right? If
Yeah.
and that's why if you're building a team and like you're after someone who can maintain a database, then Postgres is really a good contender for that one, especially for the non-Microsoft close enterprise ecosystem, right? Now, second is that there are so much besides Postgres being open source and PG
Uh-huh.
Vector extension as well being open source. right? There are also other extensions actively being developed in Postgres, like DiskN is also being developed in Postgres in
I
the
see.
open, right? And so on, right? So if you're going to that approach of like, the wider community, and by the way, licensing as well, there's no licensing fee with
Mm.
Postgres versus in
Yeah.
SQL, as you might know, right? There's
Yeah.
licensing costs around that. Even if it's Azure SQL, there's also some aspect of licensing costs around that. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
really around that, right? When
But
to use Postgres. Yeah.
but it seems like you're leaning really towards Postgres rather than the Azure SQL. But
I think so too.
yeah, because I was thinking, if we're just talking about like the features itself, like the especially on the vector side of things, um, I was thinking, would you rather pick one over the other, or it's just really it really comes down to those things that you just talked about, like
Yeah,
it being
but there's also the other aspect as well that I also want to mention is that although Postgres and the extensions are coming from like mostly community,
uh,
uh, but Microsoft as well, they're in Azure. They're also investing on some AI capabilities within Azure Database for Postgres. So
yeah,
it's not just a managed Postgres, right?
yeah,
Like
it makes
there's
sense.
like they're also creating that bridge towards AI search, bridge towards Azure OpenAI, a bridge towards RAG and so on, right? So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think one thing as well that I really like about Postgres is the especially if you're working in a non.NET space, in
Yeah.
particular Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, and Python, you'll have much more support in terms of like connectivity
Mm.
in Postgres than in Azure SQL, right? Although I know they exist right now. For sure, there's a library to connect to an Azure SQL using JavaScript or Python, but it's not as comprehensive as like Entity Framework, right?
Yeah.
Or Dapper.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've used Postgres in a lot of my projects, but lately I've been always using SQL databases, and so kind of lost the touch with the Postgres. So, but right now, hearing the things that you're saying, like it resonates to me. It feels like things that I was thinking about before, because I was a big fan of Azure SQL. As I have not used a lot of SQL databases before, but when I tried out, or at least got an experience of Postgres, I understood why people loved it. Why and not that's just thinking about just that's just me thinking in a developer's perspective. But
It,
on top of that, it's just a lot
exactly.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually a good point. Postgres is a very developer friendly, I would say, technology. However,
Yeah.
the counter argument there is, if I'm maintaining, or if me and my team needs to maintain
Mm.
a big cluster of SQL workloads, I might actually go into Azure SQL for that one, right? Like
Yeah.
the hyperscales, the managed instances,
Yeah.
those different options. I might go there, right? Let's say I have an enterprise, like a workload that I have to maintain, and I'm working with Microsoft, right? I can rely on
Mm.
Microsoft to work with us, right? For that customer, right? Versus in here, that's you Azure and Postgres on your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus having that big relationship or big enterprise relationship with Microsoft,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so you're saying that the decision makers and the architects have it easy because they kind of like, oh, okay, let's just pick the Microsoft SQL Server or SQL database, but as developers, like even though we prefer Postgres, they would most likely kind of like lean towards
Yeah,
Azure
exactly, right? Like
Azure
using the
SQL.
database is one thing, but maintaining a big database and like
Yeah.
operating a big database requires effort and requires a team as well, right? And that
Yeah.
means you need to have the proper skill set within the team outside of just developers to
Mm.
operationalize Postgres, right?
Yeah. Well, that is also the general availability, by the way. So I'm assuming you've been using this, Michael.
Mm. Yeah.
Have you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
Very
been there
cool.
for a while. Yeah, it's been there for a while.
Yeah. And now let's jump into one that is still in public preview. It's called the N database embeddings in Azure Database for Postgres. So is this something that you've also tried out?
Yes. So the beauty of this, Bry, is that you don't need ADA002 anymore
Ooh.
for embeddings.
So
Like you
I
can
see.
generate the vector embeddings directly in Postgres.
I see. Okay, so this is the
Right?
one I was thinking about because this is the one that I think that SQL Server will have in 2025, or at
Yes.
least that's the one
Yes.
that
Exactly.
it's already. I guess you're in the same how do I say this because also they have it in public preview, but this one obviously is from Postgres. So is this like something that you think is really a good thing?
It is a good thing. Again, more decoupling, more baking in on where you're coming from, the better, right?
Uh-huh.
Again, I'm just going back to the concept of TCO, total cost of ownership.
Uh-huh.
The less you own, the better, right? The less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of the reason why we'll need like the Azure OpenAI is of course to have the ability to do embeddings to generate these embeddings. So you're saying that now we don't need
No.
that anymore.
No,
So
it's baked in to.
do,
By the way, this is only for Azure database for Postgres, right?
yeah, it's not
Not
really
the
in
Postgres. Yeah,
Yeah.
not Postgres itself.
So it's not in Postgres. It's only in the Azure database for Postgres. So
Yes.
is that like an additional cost then?
No. So that the cost would be shouldered by the compute itself of Postgres,
Oh, I see.
right? So you're not paying an Azure OpenAI subscription
Mm.
for that one. So the cost of compute, whatever compute it would generate as part of that, will be shouldered within that Azure database.
Do you know like the underlying technology under that? Like how
It is.
how did they make it work?
Yeah, it is. It's basically a shadow symbolic linking of the embedding model. So
Oh.
what that means is that there's an embedding model sitting beside
Mhm.
the Azure database, but it's shadow. There's a symbolic link, and it's like a shadow. So like
I see. It's obstructed.
it's abstracted. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's pretty cool. And then I think we have this last one. So it's an Azure AI extension in Azure Database for Postgres. So is this like an have you tried this out? This is like
Yeah. So basically in AI Foundry, there will be you can point to an Azure database for Postgres as the source, right? Same goes
Yeah.
with AI search. So think of scenarios wherein like again you're more around either search driven or you're more around agent driven, right? Now with that, you're just using Azure database as a source, one of the sources in particular, right? So that means you need to enable a bunch of these AI extensions
Okay.
in the Azure database itself to naturally connect to those different capabilities, right? Yeah. So again, these are some of those extensions that is developed by Microsoft and Azure for Azure database that's hosted in Azure for
I see.
Postgres, right?
Mhm.
These are some of those AI capabilities that are baked in Azure
Mhm.
without having to code that in your application layer.
I see. I see. I thought initially extensions were like I thought that was like an extension maybe in Visual Studio Code or something like that. Yeah, I misread that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So this one's all already in GA. So
Yeah.
yeah. well, I'll be honest, I haven't tried anything of these because I haven't been using Postgres lately. But it's great. It's great to know that there are these options now. The one that I'm pretty really interested about is the second one, which is the the
Cosmos DB.
no, no, I mean the in database embedding
Ah,
for
right, right.
the
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm excited for that in the SQL server. That's why I kind of like was looking at it before, but this one I didn't know that they also have this offering now, which is already in Azure.
Exactly right. And now
Yeah.
because of that, you're now thinking there's no need for an Azure vector database, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you already have vector data stores across these
Yeah.
different, SQL engines or database engines.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I feel like there's a lot of a big part there that is now not needed because you only need this Azure database now to do such stuff. And now I'm just wondering like when you do like searches or query it, do you like have to parse the data within Postgres then like or in the query,
No,
like
no.
how do you convert a search term into like a vector embedding?
All right,
Do you
yeah.
still need like
No, so that's the beauty of it. So in
uh,
that one, in the generate embeddings directly, so you can
uh,
literally just add the way it's gonna work is that you're just gonna add a extra column that
uh,
would kind of like convert this row into that vector embedding.
yeah, but
Yeah.
how do you query, like how do you let's say I have a search term, let's say the capital
Right, right,
capital.
right. Okay.
So how do I convert? Do you have like a do I need to convert it into vector embedding, and how do I do that?
Yes, yes, yeah. All right. So basically, the answer is this particular feature is more around like just for the insertion of data.
For the insertion.
It's
Okay.
not for retrieval.
I see.
All right.
I
So that
see.
means that it means that my chat, my prompt, still needs to be
Uh-huh.
converted into an embedding, right? So that's something
Which
you still have to go through ADA in Azure OpenAI or so,
uh,
right? But
but
what?
don't I need to use the same model then for that, like the same ML model
Yeah, yes,
to
yes. But then the use case is a bit different, right? This is for storing data, wherein like the moment I store or I committed this row in Postgres, there's already a shadow vector embedding for me,
I see.
right? Like
Uh,
let's say your application, you're inserting records in your Postgres database, you are already populating your
mm,
vector embeddings as well.
I
But that
see.
doesn't solve the retrieval problem, right? So
Okay.
the
Mm.
retrieval, again, there's also other alternatives around that wherein you can obviously embed your prompt into
Mm.
embeddings, and then you can use different algorithms. Even you're not using AI search, there are algorithms directly you can do, like retrieve from Postgres from my embedded prompt,
Mm.
IBFF and all those different search algorithms. You can perform that through code, right?
Nice. Makes sense. Okay. All right then. It's nice. And then yeah, I think that's the last one. And so I think now we can jump in to our TikTok time. But before that, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about like the whole vector database? Because for me, I'll be honest, it's something that I feel like I'm gonna be using really really soon.
Yes, it's
I it's the thing about honestly the thing about the things that I learned within Azure is that some of them I enjoy and enjoy learning, but I never really get to use it. Like I have set a lot of those features that
that,
where that is the case, but
uh,
I feel like vector database is something that I'll be using
I
really
think
soon.
I think most of us will be using this soon, right? One, Microsoft is really pushing hard with the AI
Uh-huh.
push and cloud push and
Uh,
everything,
yeah.
right? Second is that again, the way I'm seeing it is that it's like NoSQL, right? Again, with
Azure, yeah.
MongoDB and everything, like even there's no MongoDB, I'm still using Azure SQL. I'm still using Postgres. Azure SQL and Postgres also supports,
Yeah.
NoSQL now with JSON, BSON, and all those different data types, right? So now I'm just looking at it on that same pattern, wherein like now we're just entering that next iteration of this different
Uh-huh.
data type. And
Yeah.
if I still know how to work with a database, I would still know how to work with AI pretty much, right? I think that's
Yeah.
like the natural extension that we're seeing.
And then at the same time, you're talking about the next iteration, which is like we have this new thing called agents, and I feel like this will be very well.
Yes,
This
very
is kind of like
relevant. Yeah.
I mean that's basically the underlying works
Yeah.
on the agents is the these vector embeddings and vector search in general. So yeah, I mean I think that is something that I'm really looking forward and working on in the future. Um, yeah, any thoughts?
Um, yeah. Again, even up until now, I'm actually not surprised, but like I'm fascinated because like with AI tour that happened last week, and
Mm-hmm.
like LinkedIn stuff happening to me as well. Wherein like like everyone's interested in this space, and it's
Yeah,
nice to be early on as well, right? You form some opinions based from your early interpretation, early interaction with the technology, and now we're getting to that adoption phase, right? And
yeah,
even though we're still in the early days, but like I already have positioning wherein I like C sharp versus Java, just
yeah.
like how it was back then, right? So
Mm.
I think I'm already getting to that point already that it's just preference and like what's your familiarity and so on.
Well, I think that's all for our discussion, and so now we can jump into the TikTok time. But this time, we're only gonna have one set of questions because I feel like we're taking a bit of time, so we kind of want to have this one TikTok time session, and then we can. It's a bit different this time. It's the what am I? So I'm gonna give you a set of clues, but I'm gonna give it to you one by one, and it gets to the hardest up to the easiest, so you can get it at the end. But let's see, maybe you can get it at the very beginning, of the clue, and yeah, let's see how good you are with the Azure databases. You ready?
Yeah, already.
Awesome. All right then. Let's start off with this one. So the first clue is my global distribution capabilities enable you to replicate data across multiple regions with low latency reads and writes. So before you answer, I'm going to tell you right now, this can be very specific. I'm not just talking about like the general term of the service. It's kind of like could be very specific. So maybe the first clue might not be the only the only clue that would make sense. There might be a much more specific clues coming in.
Okay, so I'm guessing Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL, but in particular, the Citus extension allows
Okay.
that
Okay.
capability.
All right. So that might be too specific. Maybe yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna give you the next clue.
Okay.
But your initial that's your initial guess. Okay, it's Azure
Yeah.
Cosmos DB with NoSQL. So next one's while I offer SQL-like queries, I don't strictly adhere to relational database constraints, giving developers flexibility in data modeling. Does that
Right, right, right. I think yeah, okay. I think I'm getting here. So now I've changed my answer to Azure Cosmos DB for Postgres with the Citus extension because Postgres supports
mm-hmm.
SQL-like queries. But then again, as I mentioned earlier, Postgres also supports NoSQL stuff using BSON. And if I
Okay.
host that through Cosmos DB, then I get that global distribution.
All right then. I mean, I'm not sure. We'll see. So let's see the last clue. I am a NoSQL database service that allows you to query documents using SQL syntax for flexible schema-less data. Does that change anything for you, or?
Yeah, so I'm going back to my first, my first guess, which is NoSQL.
Okay,
Again, Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL, just because of querying documents. Again, very specifically
I
querying
see.
documents. Yeah.
And oh, actually, I might be. This might be wrong. This should be, yeah. I'm also pretty sure as well. It is Azure Cosmos DB for for NoSQL. I don't know why it's like.
I
Maybe
was
I'm
like
wrong.
hyperscale. Oh.
Uh, I don't know why. Maybe I mixed some stuff up. But it is. You're right. You're supposed to be right. I don't know why it's like this, but you're supposed to be right. Yeah, yeah. So it's Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one is this. So I support automatic backup, disaster recovery, and high availability without the need to manually manage infrastructure.
Yeah. So
Is
the
that
answer there
anything?
is the answer is all of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Right. Right. So the
Yeah.
answer is all
So
of them. Right.
it doesn't narrow down anything at the moment.
Yeah.
All right, to the next clue. I'm often chosen when migrating large-scale
Mm.
on-premise enterprise
Okay.
SQL workloads with minimal changes.
All right. So that's the best clue, which is the minimal changes. So I'm going with Azure SQL Managed Instance. Yeah.
Managed instance, okay? And then lastly, I'm a fully
Yeah.
managed scalable relational database that offers near complete compatibility with SQL Server. So you're sticking with
Yes.
your answer.
Yes. Managed Instance.
And you're right. It's Azure SQL Database Managed Instance.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, 2 points for you already. Even though the first answer was, I don't know, maybe that's the right answer. I don't know. So next one is I was just recently announced to be part of an end-to-end data analytics platform. I know.
Yeah.
Does this
I
ring a
know.
bell?
Yeah. Of course, it's Microsoft Fabric. So I know it's
Okay.
Fabric.
Okay, but again, could be specific.
Could be Synapse,
We'll see.
right? But then recently announced.
Yeah. The next one is I'm a transactional database designed for
Oh.
OLTP workloads built on the Azure Database Engine.
Ah.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. So this is very specific now, which is the Fabric database.
Okay.
So because Fabric database is
Could be.
new, so in Fabric
Mhm.
it now supports a OLTP workload,
Uh-huh.
which is through this Fabric database, which is again a mirrored or a shadow technology of an Azure SQL engine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We're not sure yet. Let's see. We're not sure yet. Let's see the last clue. I enable seamless integration with analytics, automatically replicating data into one lake
Yeah.
in near real time for further processing and analysis. So we're sticking with your answer.
Yes, and that
Fabric
third part is through
database.
concept called mirrors. So the answer
I
is
see.
Fabric database. Yeah.
And you're right. Yeah, it is Fabric Database, and it was recently announced. So not sure if you've been using it so
Yes,
far.
it's a game changer so far
It is.
because yeah, like
Mhm.
now it opened a lot of those write back capabilities.
Uh-huh.
Where in like, hey, I have a report in Power BI, but what if more than just a report, I also want to, insert back to a database. So now it opens
Yeah.
a lot of those use cases too.
Yeah, I think you're really happy about this one. So yeah, I
Yes.
included it. Yeah, and so next one, and I think this might be the last one, or this is the fourth one, maybe, or maybe fifth. I don't know.
You can use
So
me.
this one is, you can use me if you can use it if you need the power of relational data with the scalability and performance of a globally distributed database.
Yeah, so I think I might go to Postgres for Azure
Mhm.
Cosmos DB for Postgres, right?
Okay. The next one's my unique features allow for horizontal scaling and multi-region replication, providing low
Ah.
latency performance worldwide. Okay.
This is Azure SQL Hyperscale. Yeah.
Okay. So now I think you now know.
Oh,
Actually, I have an
oh.
open source database with flexibility
Mm.
of Postgres and global
So there you go.
distribution
So I'm
capabilities.
back to my original answer, which is Azure Cosmos DB for Postgres.
Okay. I hope that's what's written here, but because I'm not sure. I got things mixed up, I think. But you're right.
Yeah,
Is it Cosmos DB? Is that Cosmos
yeah,
DB?
yeah. Azure
Okay,
Cosmos
so
DB for
it's
Postgres. Yeah.
all
So
right then.
it uses the Citus extension. So
I
same
see.
technology that Planet Scale and all those, Postgres
I see.
as a service type of offerings out there.
I see. All right then. I think we have the last one,
Uh,
which I am
that's
designed for massive scale and can handle terabytes of data without sacrificing performance. I think this kind of like tells a lot. So
Yeah, that's hyperscale for sure.
okay.
And you need to be very rich to afford this. You
Oh
need to-
yeah, yeah. I did some I did some research about it because I always was thinking about what's hyperscale. I've heard it a
yeah,
lot, and yeah, thought that it's good that I did some research because I feel like I won't be using it anyway, so at least I know what that is. The next one's my architecture is based on distributed cloud model, which allows rapid scaling and high availability.
yeah.
And then lastly, unlike traditional databases, I can support fast backups, restore operations, and point-in-time recovery,
It's like
even
it's
for
like
most databases.
yeah, it's like you've come to a point wherein like your data is used everywhere and like your whole
Yeah.
operations globally depends on your database, and
Yeah.
you have the obviously you can pay for this and like so on, hyperscale,
Mm.
right? Um,
It is, and it is Azure SQL Database Hyperscale. Yes, you're right. So the first one, I think I mistyped it or maybe copied the wrong answer, but yeah, you're perfect. It's 5 out of 5. So congratulations. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you had a hard time answering these questions. I feel like,
No,
I
it's
think,
fine because I think the narrow it down really helps. But
yeah, yeah,
like again, however, a lot of these are like overlapping as well because
yeah.
like
I
you
was
can do
gonna
this, you can
say.
do that as well.
I was gonna say that we can see or you can kind of like tell that in Azure there's a lot of like performance related or things that are really overlapping, but it always comes down to like something specific that you might need as a solution in your project or whatever. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, Michael.
Awesome. Yeah. Again,
Yeah.
I really like it. I think now more than ever, we are storing more data
Mm-hmm.
as we go along, and I think the key message for me or key takeaway for me is that as powerful and as amazing what AI is doing and
Mm-hmm.
LLMs are doing, your data is still the cornerstone or the foundation of your business, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
all these options, these different times of AI now, the foundation is still the same. You need to store your data somewhere, right?
Yeah. And also you have to choose wisely when
Yeah.
it deals with you're dealing with these things, because choosing a database is not really that like an easy of a thing to do. You have to consider a lot of things, and so hopefully we kind of like
Yeah, getting started with a database is easy, but telling someone to move data from one database platform to the other, that's even
it's
harder.
gotta be
So,
expensive
very
and time
expensive. Yeah.
consuming. Yeah, and yeah, so like I said, hopefully we kind of help you figure out like what are the options that you might want to consider, and at the same time maybe narrow it. We were able to at least narrow it down for you, and yeah, hopefully we help.
All right.
But yeah, that's been for today. It's a great discussion,
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll see you next time. And have a happy holidays. It's gonna be
Happy
Christmas
holidays,
soon as
everyone.
the time of the recording. And yeah, I mean, hopefully this will be posted before or just by the Christmas. And yeah, we'll see you soon. I mean, Merry Christmas, Michael.
So, yeah,
And
you too. All right, we'll see each other soon as well next week.
all right.
So, thank
See you
you.
guys.
Bye bye.
Bye. Good day, good evening, and good morning. Hello, everyone. I am Brian Anthony Garcia, and I'm with Michael Pena, and this is the Cloudy Days. So yeah, Michael, how are you? Oh yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, you can't really tell sometimes if it's gonna be hot or cold. It was really hot yesterday. I was outside too, but now I'm